The man sat alone in the hospital corridor, his dark brown hands trembling as he stared at the examination room door. If the results came back bad, he had no idea who would take care of his daughter. Fear was swallowing him whole when a woman in an expensive coat suddenly sat down beside him. She was polished, cold, clearly someone important. But her voice cracked when she leaned close to his ear. "Please pretend you're my husband." He turned to look at her, a stranger, desperate. Why would a powerful CEO beg a man she had never met? Darius Jordan had been sitting in the oncology wing of Northwestern Memorial Hospital for over 2 hours. The plastic chair was hard beneath him, and the sterile smell of disinfectant filled his lungs with every breath. He was 35 years old, a black single dad, and a mechanic at a small garage in suburban Chicago, and he had never felt more alone in his life. 3 years ago, his wife Janelle died in a car accident, leaving him to raise their daughter by himself. Now he was waiting to find out if he had lung cancer. If the biopsy came back positive, Maya would have no one. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to his favorite picture. Maya, 6 years old, warm brown skin, a halo of tight black curls, wild and tangled, hugging her stuffed bear with a grin so wide it made his chest ache. She was everything. The only reason he got up in the morning, the only reason he kept going. His parents were gone, his brother lived 3 states away, and they barely talked. There was no safety net. If something happened to him, Maya would fall straight through. His hands were shaking when the phone slipped from his grip and clattered to the floor. Before he could reach down, the woman beside him picked it up. He had not even noticed her sit down. She glanced briefly at the screen at Maya's smiling face, then handed it back without a word. Her expression was unreadable, but something flickered in her eyes, something almost like longing. Darius muttered a quick thank you and studied her for a moment. She was dressed in a tailored coat that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her posture was rigid, controlled, like someone used to being watched. Everything about her screamed money and power. Yet, she was sitting here in the oncology wing, same as him, waiting for results that could change everything. Her name was Sarah Mitchell, though Darius did not know that yet. She was the CEO of Mitchell Properties, one of the largest real estate firms in the Midwest. For the past decade, she had built her reputation on being untouchable, cold, invincible. No one on her board knew she was here today. No one knew about the lump she had found in her breast 3 weeks ago, or the terror that had kept her awake every night since. She had come alone because she had no one to bring, no family, no partner. Just an empire she had built with her own hands and a body that might be turning against her. The oncology wing was quiet, except for the occasional shuffle of nurses and the distant hum of machines. Darius stared at the door to the examination room, willing it to open, willing someone to come out and tell him it was nothing, just a scare. Go home to your daughter. But the door stayed closed and the minutes stretched on like hours. Sarah sat 3 seats away, her phone dark in her lap. She was not scrolling, not typing, not doing any of the things busy executives did to fill time. She was just sitting there perfectly still, like a statue carved from ice. But her hands were clenched so tight her knuckles had gone white. Then the elevator doors opened and everything changed. A woman in her late 50s stepped out, draped in designer clothes and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her husband trailed behind her, looking bored. They were clearly headed for the VIP wing on the floor above, but the woman stopped when she spotted Sarah. Her smile sharpened into something predatory. Patricia Henderson was a board member at Mitchell Properties and the leader of a faction that had been trying to push Sarah out for years. She believed a company should be run by someone stable, someone with roots, someone with a family, not a single woman who worked 18-hour days and had never shown a flicker of vulnerability in her life. Patricia walked over with the casual confidence of someone who knew she had the upper hand. She looked around the oncology wing, then back at Sarah, and her voice dripped with false concern. "Sarah, darling, what are you doing here, all alone? Where's your husband?" Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She knew exactly what Patricia was doing. If word got back to the board that she was sick and had no one to support her, they would use it against her. The merger with the New York firm was weeks away from closing. Any sign of instability could destroy everything she had worked for. Patricia pressed on, her tone syrupy sweet. "Oh, right, I forgot. You're still single, aren't you?" Poor thing. It must be so hard going through something like this without anyone by your side. Sarah felt the walls closing in. She had spent her entire career making sure no one ever saw her sweat. And now Patricia was watching her like a hawk circling wounded prey. She needed to say something. She needed to shut this down, but her mind was blank, and the fear she had been holding back all morning was starting to claw its way up her throat. Then she looked to her left and saw Darius, the man who had dropped his phone, the man with the picture of the little girl and the tired eyes and the hands that would not stop shaking. He was nobody, a stranger. But in that moment, he was the only thing standing between her and total exposure. Before she could think it through, Sarah moved. She crossed the 3 seats between them and sat down right beside him. Her hand found his fingers, lacing together like they had done it 1,000 times. She looked up at Patricia with a smile that could have frozen fire. "My husband is right here, Patricia." Darius went rigid. His brain short-circuited, trying to process what was happening. This woman he had never met was holding his hand and calling him her husband in front of some rich lady who looked like she ate people for breakfast. He should pull away. He should say something. But then he looked into Sarah's eyes, and behind the ice, he saw it. Desperation, fear. The same terror he had been feeling all morning reflected back at him like a mirror. Patricia's smile faltered. She looked Darius up and down, taking in his worn jacket, his calloused hands, the way he sat stiffly in a space that clearly wasn't his. "I've never seen him at any company events." Sarah did not miss a beat. "He prefers to stay out of the spotlight, supports me from behind the scenes. Not everyone needs to be front and center, Patricia." Darius felt Sarah's grip tighten slightly on his hand, a silent plea. He did not know why he did what he did next. Maybe it was the fear in her eyes. Maybe it was the fact that he knew what it felt like to be alone and terrified and desperate for someone to just be there. Whatever the reason, he shifted closer to Sarah and placed his other hand on the small of her back, protective, natural, like he had done it 100 times before. Patricia's eyes narrowed, but she could not find a crack in their armor. Darius answered her questions with easy confidence, giving vague responses about working with his hands and preferring a quiet life. He even smiled, a small, tired smile that made him look like exactly what Sarah had claimed, a supportive husband who did not need the spotlight. After a few more probing questions that led nowhere, Patricia finally retreated. She gave them one last look, suspicion still lingering in her eyes, then headed for the elevator with her husband in tow. The moment the doors closed behind her, Sarah let go of Darius's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me." Darius looked at her, really looked, without the armor of her perfect posture and expensive clothes. She seemed smaller somehow, more human. He recognized the exhaustion in her face because he saw it in the mirror every morning. "You're waiting for results too," he said. It was not a question. Sarah nodded slowly. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she did not feel completely alone. This stranger, this black mechanic with the picture of his daughter and the kind eyes, had just saved her without asking for anything in return. She did not even know his name. "I'm Sarah," she said quietly. "Darius," he replied. They sat there in silence, two strangers bound together by a lie and a shared fear that neither of them could name. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside the oncology wing, the clock on the wall ticked toward an uncertain future. An hour after Patricia left, a nurse called both their names. Darius and Sarah exchanged a look, surprised to realize they had been waiting for the same doctor. They followed the nurse down a long corridor and into a consultation room where Dr. Matthews, a tired-looking man in his 50s, delivered news that neither of them wanted to hear. The initial biopsies were inconclusive. Both of them would need additional testing, a PET scan, another round of samples. They would have to come back in 3 days. Darius felt the floor shift beneath him. 3 more days of not knowing. 3 more days of looking at Maya and wondering if he was running out of time. He thanked the doctor quietly and walked out of the room. his mind already racing through all the arrangements he would have to make. Who would watch Maya while he was at the hospital? How would he explain another absence from work? The questions piled up like stones on his chest. Sarah caught up with him in the parking lot. The afternoon sun was harsh, bouncing off the windshields of hundreds of cars, and she squinted against the glare as she fell into step beside him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They were just two people walking through a concrete maze, carrying the same weight on their shoulders. When they reached Darius's truck, an old Ford with rust creeping up the wheel wells, Sarah finally broke the silence. For the next 3 days, I need you to keep pretending, at least when we're at the hospital. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, a crack in the armor. Patricia will have people watching me. If she finds out I lied, it's over. Darius shook his head. He pulled his keys from his pocket and stared at them like they held some kind of answer. I don't belong in your world, Miss Mitchell. I'm a mechanic. I fix cars for a living. Whatever game you're playing with your board, I can't be part of it. Sarah took a breath. She had spent her entire career reading people, finding the thing they wanted most, and using it to close deals. She hated herself for what she was about to do, but desperation had a way of erasing boundaries. I'll pay you, she said, whatever you need. She hesitated, searching for the right words. If your results don't go well, I can help you find someone to take care of your daughter. Good people, a stable home, I have resources. The words hit Darius like a punch to the gut. He had been thinking about nothing else for weeks. What would happen to Maya if he died? She had no grandparents, no aunts or uncles nearby, no one who could step in and give her the life she deserved. And here was this woman, this stranger, offering him the one thing he could not provide for himself, a safety net. He stood there for a long moment, keys digging into his palm. Every instinct told him to walk away. This was not his problem. This woman and her corporate wars had nothing to do with him. But then he thought about Maya, about her laugh and her drawings, and the way she still talked to her mother's picture every night before bed. If there was even a chance that Sarah could help protect her, how could he say no? 3 days, Darius said finally. His voice was flat, resigned. That's it. Sarah nodded. Something in her chest loosened just a fraction. 3 days. The first day felt like walking through a minefield. Sarah had arranged for them to meet at the hospital in the morning to sign insurance paperwork. She was using her family coverage plan, which required a spouse's signature on certain forms. Darius showed up in clean jeans and a button-down shirt that looked like it had been ironed for the first time in years. He felt out of place the moment he stepped through the automatic doors, acutely aware of how he looked here. A black single dad from a small garage, standing under fluorescent lights and marble columns built for donors and executives. They sat in the hospital cafeteria after the paperwork was done, waiting for Sarah's next appointment. The silence between them was awkward, filled with all the things they did not know about each other. Darius stared at his coffee cup, turning it slowly in his hands, while Sarah checked her phone for emails that did not matter. Tell me about your daughter, Sarah said suddenly. She was not sure why she asked. Maybe she just needed something to fill the silence. Maybe she was tired of pretending she did not care. Darius looked up, surprised. For a moment, he seemed to weigh whether or not to answer. Then something in his expression softened and he started to talk. He told her about Maya's obsession with drawing, how she filled notebook after notebook with pictures of animals and houses and imaginary worlds. He told her about the nightlight shaped like a star that Maya could not sleep without because she was still afraid of the dark. He told her about the night Maya had asked him if Mommy was watching them from the stars and how he had barely made it to the bathroom before he started crying. Sarah listened without interrupting. She had spent so many years surrounded by people who only talked about money and power and strategy. She had forgotten what it felt like to hear someone speak about something real, something that mattered. By the time Darius finished, she realized she was jealous. Not of his circumstances, God knows she would not trade places with him, but of the love, the simple, overwhelming love he had for his daughter. She had never felt anything like that in her life. The second day was harder. Patricia showed up at the hospital again, this time with her assistant in tow. She claimed she was there for a routine checkup, but Sarah knew better. Patricia was hunting for evidence, looking for any crack in the story Sarah had told her. The moment she spotted Sarah and Darius in the lobby, she made a beeline straight for them. Darius saw her coming and reacted on instinct. He took Sarah's hand, lacing their fingers together the way he had done before. Sarah leaned into him slightly, her shoulder brushing against his arm. They looked like any other couple waiting for an appointment, comfortable, familiar. Patricia circled them like a shark, asking pointed questions about how they had met and where they lived, and why Darius never came to company events. Darius answered calmly, sticking to the vague story they had rehearsed. He worked with his hands. He valued his privacy. He supported his wife from behind the scenes. After 20 minutes of interrogation, Patricia finally gave up and left. But the damage was done. Sarah's next appointment was not for another 2 hours, and they could not risk being seen apart. So they walked to a small restaurant a few blocks from the hospital and sat down for lunch like a real married couple. The restaurant was quiet, half empty in the lull between lunch and dinner. Sarah ordered a salad she did not touch. Darius ordered a sandwich and ate mechanically, his mind elsewhere. For a while they just sat there, two strangers pretending to be something they were not. Then Sarah asked a question that surprised them both. "Aren't you scared of dying?" Darius set down his sandwich. He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes tired and distant. "Terrified," he admitted, "but I'm more scared of Maya becoming an orphan than I am of death itself. If I die, she has no one. That's what keeps me up at night. Not the cancer, not the pain, just the thought of her being alone." Sarah did not say anything. She could not. His words had opened something inside her, a door she had kept locked for years. She realized sitting there in that half-empty restaurant that she had no one who would miss her if she died. No one who would stay up at night worrying about her. She had built an empire, but she had built it alone. And for the first time in her life, she wondered if it had been worth it. The third day arrived faster than either of them expected. They met at the hospital early in the morning, both of them quieter than usual. The jokes and small talk from the previous days had dried up, replaced by a heavy silence that neither of them could break. Today was the day they would find out if their lives were about to change forever. Before they went in to see the doctor, Sarah turned to Darius. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Darius. Whatever happens today, these 3 days were the first time I didn't feel alone." Darius looked at her. He wanted to say something meaningful, something that would capture everything he was feeling, but the words would not come. Before he could figure out what to say, the door to the examination room opened and a nurse called his name. Darius went in first. He sat across from Dr. Matthews and listened as the doctor explained the results of his PET scan and additional biopsy. The tumor in his lung was benign, not cancer, just a growth that could be monitored over time. He was going to be fine. The relief hit him so hard he nearly fell out of his chair. He pressed his dark brown hands to his face and took a shaky breath, trying to hold himself together. He was going to live. He was going to see Maya grow up. He was going to be there for her first day of middle school, her first heartbreak, her graduation. All the futures he had been too afraid to imagine suddenly spread out before him like a road with no end. When he walked out of the examination room, Sarah was waiting. She saw the expression on his face and knew immediately. A small smile crossed her lips, genuine and warm. "Good news." Darius nodded. He could not speak yet. The emotions were still too raw, too close to the surface. Then it was Sarah's turn. She stood up, smoothed down her coat, and walked into the examination room with her shoulders squared and her chin high. The door closed behind her, and Darius waited. 20 minutes later, she came out. Her face was pale, her expression carefully blank, but Darius could see it in her eyes. The news had not been good. And "Malignant," she said quietly. "Stage 1. They caught it early, but I'll need surgery and treatment after that." Darius did not think. He just moved. He crossed the space between them and took her hand the same way she had taken his 3 days ago. This time it was not for show. This time it was real. Sarah looked down at their joined hands, and for a moment she let herself feel it. The warmth of his skin against hers, the steadiness of his grip. She had spent her whole life refusing to need anyone. And now here she was, holding on to a stranger like he was the only thing keeping her from drowning. Then her phone rang. She pulled it from her pocket and answered without thinking. The voice on the other end was bright and cheerful, completely oblivious to the weight of the moment. It was her assistant, calling with news about the merger. "Miss Mitchell, the merger has been approved. The board was impressed by your family support system. Mrs. Henderson couldn't find any grounds to object anymore. Congratulations." Darius heard every word. The phone was pressed close to Sarah's ear, but in the quiet of the hospital corridor, the assistant's voice carried clearly. Family support system. The words echoed in his head, taking on a meaning he had not considered before. He let go of Sarah's hand and stepped back. His expression had changed, hardening into something cold and distant. "Congratulations," he said flatly. "Your deal went through." Sarah's eyes widened. She could see what he was thinking, could see the walls going up behind his eyes. "Darius, you don't understand." But Darius was already shaking his head. "I understand perfectly. From the start, you needed a fake husband to protect your career. I did my job." He turned and started walking toward the elevator. "Good luck with your surgery, Miss Mitchell." Sarah called after him, but he did not stop. He did not look back. The elevator doors opened and he stepped inside, and then he was gone. That night, Darius sat on the floor of Maya's bedroom, watching her sleep. She was curled up under her blanket with her stuffed bear tucked under her chin, her breathing soft and even. The nightlight cast a gentle glow across her face, and Darius felt his heart crack open all over again. He was going to live. He was going to be here for her. That was all that mattered. But there was something else now, a hollow feeling in his chest that had nothing to do with his health. He kept thinking about Sarah, about the look on her face when she got her diagnosis, about the way her hand had felt in his. He had told himself it was all fake, a business arrangement. But somewhere along the way, something had shifted, and he did not know how to shift it back. Maya stirred in her sleep and opened her eyes. "Daddy." Darius leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Go back to sleep, sweetheart." But Maya was already sitting up, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy, where's the pretty lady? Is she coming to visit?" Darius felt something twist in his stomach. "What pretty lady? The one from the hospital? You were holding her hand in the picture on your phone?" Maya yawned. She looked sad. "I want to make her a drawing so she feels better." Darius stared at his daughter. He had not realized Maya had seen anything. He had not realized how much she noticed. "Maybe someday," he said softly. "Now go to sleep." Maya nodded and lay back down, already drifting off. Darius stayed there for a long time, watching her breathe, trying to convince himself that he had done the right thing. Across the city, Sarah sat alone in her penthouse apartment. The lights of downtown Chicago glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but she did not see them. She was staring at her phone, at the call log that showed Darius's number over and over again. She had tried calling him 6 times. He had not answered once. The merger was complete. Her position was secure. She had won. But sitting there in the dark, surrounded by all the expensive furniture and art she had accumulated over the years, she had never felt more defeated. The diagnosis was bad enough. The surgery, the treatment, the first time, the months of uncertainty ahead, all of that she could handle. She had handled worse. What she could not handle was this, the silence, the emptiness, the knowledge that she had finally let someone see the real her, and he had walked away thinking she had used him. She picked up her phone and tried his number one more time. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. She hung up without leaving a message. What would she even say? Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, Sarah Mitchell sat alone in the dark, wondering if she had just lost the only person who had ever truly seen her. 1 week passed. Darius returned to his routine like nothing had happened. He woke up at 6, made breakfast for Maya, dropped her off at school, and drove to the garage where he spent his days buried under the hoods of other people's cars. The work was familiar, mechanical, something he could do without thinking. That was good because thinking was the last thing he wanted to do. But the nights were different. After Maya went to bed, Darius would sit alone in the living room, staring at the television without seeing it. His mind kept drifting back to the hospital, to Sarah, to the look on her face when she got her diagnosis. He told himself he had done the right thing. She had used him. The whole thing had been a transaction, a business deal dressed up as something more. But no matter how many times he repeated it, the words felt hollow, like a lie he was telling himself to make the walking away easier. One evening, Maya came home from school with a drawing tucked under her arm. She ran into the kitchen where Darius was making mac and cheese and thrust the paper toward him with a proud grin. "Look, Daddy, I made this for art class." Darius wiped his hands on a towel and took the drawing. It showed 3 figures standing in front of a house. A tall man with deep brown skin, a small girl with dark curls and warm brown skin, and a woman with brown hair wearing a blue dress. They were all holding hands, and above them, Maya had drawn a big yellow sun with a smiley face. "Who is this?" Darius asked, pointing to the woman. Maya climbed onto a kitchen chair and leaned over to look at her own drawing. "That is Daddy's friend, the pretty lady from the hospital. She looked sad, so I wanted to draw her being happy with us." Darius stared at the picture. Something in his chest tightened, a feeling he could not name and did not want to examine too closely. "That is very nice, sweetheart," he managed to say. "Now wash your hands. Dinner is almost ready." That night, after Maya was asleep, Darius sat at the kitchen table with the drawing in front of him. He traced the outline of the woman with his finger, thinking about Sarah alone in her penthouse, facing surgery with no one by her side. He thought about the way she had listened when he talked about Maya. Really listened, like what he was saying actually mattered. He thought about the fear in her eyes when she grabbed his hand that first day, and the warmth that had replaced it by the third. He picked up his phone and scrolled to her number. His thumb hovered over the call button for a long moment. Then he set the phone down and went to bed. Across the city, Sarah was being prepped for surgery. The hospital room was cold and sterile, filled with the hum of machines and the quiet efficiency of nurses checking monitors and adjusting IV lines. She lay on the gurney in a thin hospital gown, staring up at the ceiling tiles and counting the tiny holes in each one, anything to keep her mind from wandering to darker places. A nurse appeared at her side with a clipboard. "Miss Mitchell, is there anyone we should contact? Any family we can call?" Sarah shook her head slowly. "No, there is no one." The nurse's expression flickered with something that might have been pity, but she was professional enough not to let it show for long. She made a note on her clipboard and moved on to the next task, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. For the first time in years, Sarah felt tears building behind her eyes. She had spent her entire adult life proving that she did not need anyone. She had built a company from nothing, fought off hostile takeovers, stared down board members who wanted to see her fail. She had never cried. Not when her parents died within a year of each other, not when her engagement fell apart in her 20s, not once in all the years since. But lying there in that cold hospital room, waiting to be wheeled into surgery, she finally broke. The tears came silently at first, sliding down her temples and disappearing into her hair. Then her shoulders started to shake and she pressed her hand over her mouth to keep from making a sound. She was not crying because she was afraid of dying. She was crying because she had realized too late that she had spent her whole life pushing people away, and now there was no one left to hold on to. Before they took her to the operating room, Sarah asked the nurse for a pen and paper. Her hands were trembling, but she forced herself to write. The letter was short, only a few paragraphs, but every word cost her something. "Darius," she wrote, "I chose you that day because I needed a fake husband. But in those 3 days, I realized I did not need a husband. I needed someone who truly saw me. You were the first person to do that. I am sorry I was not brave enough to tell you this when I still could. If I do not make it through, please tell Maya that the pretty lady thinks she is the luckiest girl in the world to have a dad like you." She folded the letter and gave it to her assistant with instructions to deliver it to Darius' address. Then they wheeled her away and she closed her eyes and the world went dark. The letter arrived the next morning. Darius was in the kitchen making breakfast when he heard the knock at the door. He opened it to find a young woman in a business suit holding an envelope. She did not say anything, just handed him the letter and walked away. Darius stood in the doorway, staring at his name written in elegant handwriting on the front of the envelope. He tore it open and read the words inside once, then twice, then a third time. His hands were shaking by the time he finished. Maya looked up from her cereal. "Daddy, your eyes are red." Darius did not answer. He was already reaching for his phone, dialing the garage to tell them he would not be coming in. Then he called Mrs. Rodriguez next door and asked if she could watch Maya for a few hours. He did not explain why. He did not have time. 20 minutes later, he was in his truck speeding toward Northwestern Memorial Hospital. He did not know if he was too late. He did not know what he would say when he got there. All he knew was that he could not let her face this alone. Not anymore. He arrived at the hospital just as Sarah was being wheeled out of the recovery room. She was still unconscious, her face pale against the white pillow, her hair spread out around her head like a dark halo. Darius found a chair and pulled it up beside her bed. He took her hand in his the same way she had taken his that first day in the oncology wing, and he waited. An hour passed, then 2. The nurses came and went, checking vitals and adjusting medications. But Darius did not move. He just sat there holding her hand, watching her breathe. When Sarah finally opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was Darius. She blinked slowly, confused, certain she must be dreaming. Her voice came out cracked and dry. "Darius, am I dreaming?" Darius shook his head. "No, I am here." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Why?" Darius looked at her for a long moment. Then he squeezed her hand gently. "I am not here to pretend to be your husband anymore." Sarah's breath caught. "Then why?" "To be someone who stays," Darius said quietly. For real this time. 3 months later, Sarah completed her first round of treatment. The surgery had been successful and the doctors were optimistic about her prognosis. Her hair had started to thin from the chemotherapy and she had lost weight. But there was a lightness in her eyes that had not been there before. She was learning to let go, to accept help, to trust that she did not have to carry everything alone. Darius was still a mechanic at the same garage in suburban Chicago. His life had not changed much on the surface, but now, when he came home from work, there was someone waiting for him besides Maya, someone who asked about his day and actually wanted to hear the answer. On a warm afternoon in late spring, the three of them sat on a bench in Millennium Park, not far from the hospital where Sarah still went for her checkups. Maya was perched between them, working on an ice cream cone that was melting faster than she could eat it. The city hummed around them, but they existed in their own small bubble of peace. Maya looked up at Sarah with chocolate smeared around her mouth. "Miss Sarah, Daddy talks about you all the time. It's so annoying." "Maya." But Sarah just laughed. It was a real laugh, unguarded and free, the kind she had not allowed herself in years. "But I like it because when he talks about you, he smiles." He didn't smile like that for a long time. Sarah looked at Darius, her eyes shining. Darius looked back at her, and something passed between them that did not need words. "Thank you for not walking away," Sarah said softly. Darius reached over and rested his hand on her shoulder. "Thank you for holding my hand that day." Maya glanced between them, ice cream dripping down her chin. "Are you guys going to kiss or what?" Darius and Sarah both burst out laughing. Sarah leaned into Darius's side, and he wrapped his arm around her. Maya went back to her ice cream, perfectly content with the world she had helped create. Sometimes in our weakest moments, we find someone who makes us stronger. Not because they are perfect, but because they are real.